been thinking about our time in the book of Revelation, and I've been thinking about my voice going out too. I'm going to try to keep it as long as I can, because I have to preach next hour as well in the next service. So, I've been thinking about, in the study that we do, there are some, Revelation reveals other things, not just about Christ and about what we're studying here in the book, but it reveals some things about us. It reveals how we think and who we are. Basically, it reveals which little boxes did we check off as we came into Christianity and said, this is what I believe, this is what I believe. Now, there are certain things that are just, Paul says if you preach another gospel, that's anathema. Let those people be anathema to you that come up with another gospel. There's no other way to Christ. There's clarity in the gospel and in how we believe and who Jesus Christ is and whether there's another option and whether you can go to Mary and have Mary save you or whatever, and she's a co-redemptrix with Jesus. No. So there are things that are just like, no, our convictions and our understanding of the clarity of Scripture say that's beyond the pale. That's beyond what's possible. But then there are things that we just choose to disagree about. And this morning as I'm waking up, I'm thinking, it's like being in a restaurant. And this is going to be a terrible illustration. But you'll just have to pick go through it with me, okay? You go to a restaurant, and let's say in this particular restaurant, it's all, members. It's a members-only restaurant. You come in, and you are a member. So we're talking about everybody in the restaurant is a Christian. Everybody's a believer. Yes, we all understand that maybe, though the restaurant is for members, somebody might have a guest that they bring with them or something. It could be that but mostly it's the church. It's believers, true believers. But you go to the restaurant and people are at different tables, and there's a table of 4 and a table of 6 and a table of 8 and a table for 2, and there's different tables all around. And although everybody's ordering from the same menu, there's just differences. There are people who are vegetarians. There are people, and you think, well, all the vegetarians are at least alike, right? No, there's the vegan vegetarians, and there's the vegetarians who every once in a while will, have some bacon. Those kind of vegetarians. And then there's, so it's like you got that part of things, and you've got people who are carnivores, not just carnivores that, don't give me anything else. Give me, big slabs of raw meat, and that's how they. So there are people ordering different things. Nobody in the restaurant probably is even ordering the same thing, not the same combination of things, not the same doneness, wellness, whatever, the side of, sweet potato fries instead of the normal fries, however you switch things out and do things. They're all there for the same reason. They're hungry. They want to eat. They like the fellowship too. But they're eating different things. Their plate is full of various things. And they may not even order that very same thing the next time they come to the restaurant. They change. People change. And they're developing, and they're saying, you know what, I used to be a vegetarian. That was last year. I was a vegan last year, and now I am, anything. I'll eat anything. And as we come to Revelation, I realize I am not blind to the fact that there are people that come with different appetites or different expectations or different wishes. And there is no possible way that when we sit down at the table, everybody eats everything. We still divide it up. We still kind of go with things that are palatable to us, that we find better suited to us or make us feel okay. And maybe there are so many different reasons why we even want that particular meal or that particular type of thing or that particular dessert or that particular drink with my meal. There are certain reasons why or why not. And they're not all the same. And the reason might even change over time of why we are doing that at that time. What I want us to know is that there is not animosity when we go into the restaurant. There might be if you go into the restaurant and you're trying to get to the bathroom, somebody trips you, then there can be some animosity. But it's not in the general concept of the restaurant. It's just like that person was a jerk. But in general, there's not animosity when you go to the restaurant, and you don't care that other people chose different things. But then as I was thinking about that illustration, and no illustration is perfect, there are convictions that you have. You say, I'm really convinced about this. I am convinced that eating pork is so wrong. And in restaurants you have your smoking, section. Do you guys want smoking or non-smoking, And maybe in the church you're thinking, that's not even an option. What is that for an option that anybody's even doing that? That's not right. That is so wrong. You can't go that far to the outside of things. What I'm trying to say is that we come to church, and Todd preaches from things, and he might sometimes mention certain other options, but there's really no way to go through all of the options. And there's no way that we can all eat everything. And basically, we come away with nothing. If everything's just kind of brought together, we come with nothing. To some degree, we have to understand, when I read from that commentator, he has this idea, this slant, this understanding of things. I love reading from Linsky. I've read from Linsky my whole life. He is a definite Lutheran. He's an Augsburg, whatever. And I know when I get to certain parts of Matthew, and I'm reading through Linsky, he's going to be a, baptize the kids, kind of person or whatever. I just have to kind of say, okay, that's Linsky. And I go on. When we come to church now, as we're going through Revelation, because Revelation is just one of those books that just brings all of that to the forefront, right? It just is. You have ideas and thoughts and opinions, and it's okay to have those. It's okay to also to listen to other things and maybe even sharpen your original opinion or alter it a bit or whatever, but it's still the Word of God. And we all have thoughts and ideas and where we feel comfortable. And a lot of times where we feel comfortable is because of some of the boxes we checked as we kind of came into Christianity. And we go, I know why Linsky says that. I know why he believes that, because he checked that box. And it's okay. I don't have to hate him. I can appreciate him, actually, for a lot of various reasons. So I'm going to mention from time to time some other commentators. I'll try to, I don't know if balance out is the right thing, but at least kind of come to some understanding of the things that we're going through. We are now in Revelation chapter 8, and we had the opening of some seals, the first 6 seals. They're opened up. There were judgments on the earth, all kinds of calamities that we read about, and it was obvious to the people on the earth. All of a sudden they say, you know what? This is from God, a God that they chose to ignore prior to that time, a God that they didn't want to even consider anything about him. All of a sudden, they are crying out to the rocks, please bury us, please cover us, because we are in fear. We are afraid of the Lamb. Spare us from the Lamb, they said. And in verse 16 of chapter 6, it says, they were calling on the mountains and rocks, fall on us and hide us from the face of him who is seated on the throne, and from the wrath of the Lamb, for the great day of their wrath was come, and who can stand? So that was the question they had back at the end of chapter 6. Who can make it? Who can get through this kind of thing? In chapter 7, last week when we were here, we said that there was kind of an understanding of what was going on in heaven and on the earth in between the 6th seal and the breaking of the 7th seal. And now as we get to chapter 8, we are into that point of the 7th seal. So we have been through these 7 seal judgments. We're going to find out that when the 7th seal judgment is open, the 7th seal is opened, all of a sudden 7 more things come out. In this case, it's 7 trumpets, 7 judgments that are trumpets. Then at the end of that time, that 7th trumpet is blown, and there comes out 7 more judgments. Very different. Some would say, I think these are all of these sets of 7, 7, 7, 7 are all just repeating the same thing. You have to make that decision. I don't think so. I think as we see that they're in order, they're even numbered in order. This one came first, then after that, this one, and then this one, and this one. And then you have the last one, you have another emergence of 7 more. And that very concept of here we have things kind of tail ending off each other and connected but going on into another thing, and they get worse. I mean, if you thought the seals were bad, and we were talking about that and thinking, 1/4 of the population is dead, Well, then take whatever's left now and then say, let's just make it a third this time. let's take a third of the population, take a third of all the trees, a third of all the grass. So things are getting worse as it gets down toward the end. And I think it's rather clear that it's a chronological progression of judgments. The numbers, the idea that they're following each other, the idea that they're being opened one at a time, doesn't give me the impression that he just threw all of these 21 things, 21 judgments all out there at the same time. So the scene that John sees is one that he starts off in heaven, looking at the scene in verses 1 through 6 of our passage in chapter 8. And it's introducing these 7 trumpets. So, yes, I will read those in just a minute, Scott. Thank you for shining that up there. And then you're going to have your 7 trumpets. You're going to have the 7 trumpets, and then you'll have your 7 bowl judgments as well after that. But the opening of the 7th seal is what unleashes these 7 judgments, these trumpet judgments. This is what a millennialist or a premillennialist or a mid-millennialist or whatever, anybody that believes that there's a millennial period of time or thinks about these 70 weeks, anybody that thinks about the 70th week of Daniel, that 70th 7, many of those, not all of them, but many of those think that this would be like a mid-period time. So you have your 3.5 years and another 3.5 years. Of course, there are some who would believe that this has already happened long ago, that this 7 years has already taken place. But in Matthew 24, Christ says this. He says, "You will hear of wars and rumors of wars. See that you are not alarmed, for this must take place. But the end is not yet. For nation will rise against nation, kingdom against kingdom, and there will be famines and earthquakes in various places. All these are but the beginning of the birth pangs." And then he speaks about the second half as he talks about the great tribulation in verse 21. "For then there will be great tribulation, such as not been from the beginning of the world until now, no, and never will be. And if those days had not been cut short, no human being would be saved." So let's look in at the first verse of chapter 8 here, where we have this 7th seal, and you're going to see that in the 7th seal comes these trumpets, okay? So in verse 1, "When the Lamb opened the 7th seal, there was silence in heaven for about half an hour." Now, what could that mean? Well, one possible meaning is that it was just quiet there for half an hour, or very close to half an hour, about half an hour. When the Lamb breaks the 7th seal and the seal is opened, there was just silence. Now, I don't know about you, but a half hour of silence, I can't take 30 seconds of silence in a Bible study when I'm asking a question like, okay, what do you guys think about this? And they're like, and they're thinking. But I'm going, silence. Silence is awful. 30 seconds of silence when nobody's answering. So then I fill in the silence with me talking more like, okay, now let me ask the question another time. And then they're like confused, like, okay, now what was the first question? It's the same as the second one. If I just refocused it, I restructured it so that you could kind of maybe get at a different angle on it or something. But to think of this silence in heaven for about half an hour. And by the way, this was a place that had been very loud prior to this, right? Singing is going on, huge choirs singing, praising him. They're talking, and as the first seals were being opened, and the horses are coming, the beings are crying out, "Come!" I mean, they're crying out in a loud voice. This is a loud place in heaven. And then all of a sudden we get to this seal, and the seal is opened, and everybody's anticipating, and it's just quiet for about half an hour. And the powerful silence of all those people that are assembled there in heaven, this great crowd, they're kind of like, what happens next? What does this mean? What could this be? And I think that it's a literal about a half an hour. I'm not saying it's 28 minutes or 37 minutes, but I don't know exactly what about a half an hour is, but it's somewhere there. And the time references that we have in Revelation, we have really no grounds to think, okay, this time reference is not a half an hour, it could be anything. Or this time reference is not, or number reference or whatever, is not specifically this. There weren't 4 beings, there could have been 400. There weren't 24 elders, there could have been whatever. Granted, they can be representative of a larger group, but it still means that it's literally that number of elders, or that number of beings, or these 7 angels, or the 7 seals, or the 7 trumpets. And this half an hour I would take as a literal about a half an hour. A man by the name of Beale, an amillennial theologian, he interpreted this silence as representing the final judgment. This half-hour silence is the final judgment. But he did say, I don't know why it's a half an hour, though. I think it means the judgment, but I don't know why it's a half an hour. Another amillennialist, Alford, believed that this half hour symbolizes the rest that the people of God will enjoy in eternity. This half an hour represents the rest that people will enjoy, God's people will enjoy in eternity. And so the purpose of the silence in John's vision can have different thoughts and different meanings, but apparently it's kind of preparing people for what's going to happen after this, because there's that silence and then come these trumpet judgments. And it seems to be heightening the expectation, kind of getting them ready, like, what? I can't even imagine that feeling there in heaven as the singing and the glory and the praise and the everything just kind of settles for a bit. There was a contest here in Vienna about 5 years ago. I didn't even know it was a contest. I was just walking around and I would see these big posters, big billboards of "Be still and know that I am God." And I'm thinking, in English, throughout Vienna. Do you remember that? Anybody here that's been in Vienna all that time? Do you remember seeing all those posters, big things? I was like, what happened here? And the story behind it was somebody had won a contest that they could put whatever they wanted to on a billboard or a sign. And that's what they chose. They chose a Bible verse, "Be still and know that I am God." And all over Vienna was, "Be still and know that I am God." That verse, Psalm 46 and verse 10, says, "Be still and know that I am God. I will be exalted among the nations. I will be exalted in the earth." And I think when we get to the silence, there's just something about it like, okay, God's going to do something big here. This is something heavy. This is something weighty that we need to take notice of. So this silence, the way I see it from what we read throughout in verses 2 and beyond, is that it's kind of the lull before the storm, right? The silence before the storm hits. Many who are futurist interpreters would believe that this lull would mark that end of the 3.5-year period and the beginning of the next 3.5-year period, the break. I don't even know if I believe that, but if it's a timestamp, then maybe that's the timestamp. I don't know. If you look at verses 2 through 5, we get introduced to these 7 trumpet judgments. It says, remember this is John talking. "Then I saw the 7 angels who stand before God, and 7 trumpets were given to them. And another angel came and stood at the altar with a golden censer. And he was given much incense to offer with the prayers of all the saints on the golden altar before the throne. And the smoke of the incense with the prayers of the saints rose before God from the hand of the angel. Then the angel took the censer and filled it with fire from the altar and threw it on the earth. And there were peals of thunder, rumblings, flashings of lightning, and an earthquake." I do think it's interesting that we just came from like about 30 minutes of silence, right? And then this angel comes and throws these coals, these fire coals onto the earth, and there's just the roar. There's the peals of thunder, it says, rumblings, flashes of lightning, earthquake. John here, as we get to verse 2, he sees somebody hand these angels. We don't even know who the someone is. It doesn't tell us in the text. Could be God, maybe. I don't know. But these 7 trumpets are given to a group of 7 angels who were standing before the heavenly throne. So the fact that they're standing before the heavenly throne, maybe it was God who gave it to them. It doesn't matter. It could have been another angel that gave it to them, but it's not clear exactly who these angels are. Some people go to the point of saying these 7 angels could be the 7 archangels that are mentioned in Jewish literature, in the Apocrypha. Not mentioned in our Bible, but the Jews have certain core beliefs. One of them is that there are 7 archangels in the tradition, in their Jewish tradition. But we really, in Revelation, we have no basis to even say that. Why these 7 angels? We aren't told. But they're some kind of angels that have at least this authority, this level of authority to be able to take the trumpets and to blow these trumpets and to bring in these judgments of God. And you look at the trumpets, and you have trumpets all throughout the Scripture, by the way. And they have different meanings. They have lots of different meanings, lots of good things. It's probably not the trumpet, because this is a series of trumpets, but probably not the trumpet of God in 1 Corinthians 15:52 or 1 Thessalonians chapter 4 and verse 16. There are lots of other trumpets mentioned in the New Testament and also in the Old Testament. And they kind of signify, the trumpet sound with God mostly signifies some kind of activity. And it could be, that these trumpets, which have a really big role in a lot of what God does, it could be some kind of a ceremonial procession. It could be like they're assembling people to go to war and the trumpet blasts. Or they're warning people of somebody coming to attack them. Or that we're getting ready to take our journey, so the trumpet is blasting so we can all get going on our journey. Or for many of the special feasts that the Jews had, they would blow the trumpet, and there would be trumpets that would be involved in the feast. They would usher in the new year with a trumpet. So there's lots of different trumpet variations and uses, but a lot of them have to do with some kind of divine judgment. God is going to attack this people, and he's going to annihilate them, and there's this peal of the trumpet that sounds. And here, these trumpets are, it seems to me that they're declaring war. God is going to take over the earth. God is going to declare war on these dwellers of the earth. We know that Jericho had 7 trumpets, right? Jericho fell, and it seems like it's a very similar thing here where the world is ready to fall, and these angels of judgment are blowing their horns. Verse 3 says that the vision here of these priests, what these angels are doing, is very much like what the priests would do in the Old Testament and even in the New Testament. So there had this other angel kind of acting as a priest because he's getting the incense, the things, the golden incense from the altar. The incense contains coals of fire, it says in the text there. The angel gets this incense, which is told to us that this incense represents the prayers of the saints, or is the prayers of the saints. So these saints have been praying. They've been praying, how long, Lord? How long will this go on? Maybe they've been praying, thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Maybe it's prayers like that where they are praying, and these saints have been praying, and now this angel is taking these embers or coals of fire and the prayers of the saints, and he takes those prayers that we even saw a few chapters ago with the tribulation saints who are saying, when will we be justified? When will there be some justice done on our behalf? And Jesus says, just a little while longer. There are still more that are going to go through the tribulation and will die. Back in Luke chapter 18, there's a priest by the name of Zechariah. And it says in verse 8 of Luke 1, now while he was serving as priest before God, when his division was on duty, according to the custom of the priesthood, he was chosen by lot to enter the temple of the Lord and to burn incense. And outside, while he's doing this, verse 10, and the whole multitude of the people were praying outside at the hour of incense. If you went to Jerusalem today, if you went to Israel today, you would find people constantly praying for the peace of Jerusalem, for God to bring peace, that the enemies would just stop, that God would do something, that God would somehow bring it all back to okay again. And we see here in this thing that these prayers, no prayer of any of God's saints are forgotten. It's not like, I had no idea what you even prayed back last Thursday. No, he remembers and he knows our prayers. And then in due season, at the right time, he answers on that. He makes good on that. Verse 4 talks about the angel offering this incense that were, fittingly, a gold censer on a gold altar. Incense symbolizing the prayers, as it said. But there's a thing about these prayers. We know that this angel is not the mediator of our prayers. We know that Jesus Christ is the only mediator between God and man. 1 Timothy chapter 2 and verse 5. Some believe that these prayers, these embers that were given up, are maybe even including some of the prayers that Christ, as an intercessor, also prayed on our behalf. And that these prayers are being given up. I don't know that that's from our text, something we can count on, but some believe that. And the angel takes these coals of fire from the altar and he places them on that censer and he just casts them out on the earth. And this opens up the 7 trumpets. It says in verse 6, now the 7 angels who had the 7 trumpets prepared to blow them. So God sends this judgment on the earth, and this is a response to God's people praying, accumulated prayers, and God answers in judgment. And the trumpet judgments follow, and the storm of all these calamities from the trumpet judgments come, and the bowl judgments that are going to follow those. And all the trumpet judgments seem to proceed out of this 7th seal, that from the 7th seal come these judgments. And John saw not just one judgment, but a series of judgments that came one after another. And the fact that they're numbered, and for various reasons, like I said, it appears that they are chronologically given. The first 6 judgments are what we're going to see in this chapter and in the next chapter, in chapter 9 as well. And then it's going to be not until chapter 11 that we get to see the end of the last trumpet. There's some things that are made clear for us in the meantime. And like I said, some people think that these 7 trumpet judgments merely restate what happened in the first seals, the first 7 seals. Now these trumpet judgments are just a reaffirmation of what happened there. You'll have to think through that too. Look at the similarities and differences. There is a lot of similarity with these trumpet judgments and what happened in Egypt, with the plagues that were brought on Egypt. Definitely. You're going to see this and you're going to go, oh, that was like plague number 9. It was like what happened, right toward the end. So that is true. And that's oftentimes the case where there's kind of a foreshadowing or an understanding of something, and then we have the epitome of it, or the fulfillment of it. Verse 7, the first trumpet. The first angel blew his trumpet, and there followed hail and fire mixed with blood, and these were thrown upon the earth. And 1/3 of the earth was burned up, and 1/3 of the trees were burned up, and all green grass was burned up. So the scene shifts from heaven now, again, down to the earth. The first trumpet blasts, and it signals, it brings upon these things that it says here, like hail, lightning, it says fire in some Bible, versions. Blood is mentioned there as well. Was it blood, or was it the color of blood? A blood red sky, or blood red particles going through the sky, that's not an unusual thing. In fact, it has happened in the course of even recent history, but when the Sahara Desert kicks up storms and things in Europe here at least, and in other parts of the world, sometimes that red sand of the Sahara Desert can kind of make a red sky. I don't know exactly what the blood was, whether there was real blood mixed in with this, as it says here, that there was a mixed with blood kind of a hail and lightning. But I take these descriptions in the clearest sense possible, that a mighty storm of hail and fire mingled with blood probably means a storm of hail and fire mingled with blood. And that fact that it would make sense that if you had this firestorm of hail and stuff coming down, that it is going to kill trees, it is going to kill grass, it is going to do some very big damage. And it says that on the earth, the trees, a third of the trees, a third of all the green grass, or it actually says all of the green grass, but a third of the trees were burned up, a third of the earth was burned up. And there are many variations on this. I would take it as literally as possible. And those who are less literal in their understanding of Revelation would take it more generally. They would say that this is just a large portion of mankind, but not necessarily 1/3. Just means a large portion. Alford says, or he held that this 1/3 indicates that God spares more than he smites. That's the term he used. Spares more than he smites. Meaning that 1/3 is not 51%. God is not killing and doing damage to the earth. Right now we have nobody dying. We just have earth damage. But that there's more of the earth that's okay than is damaged by fire. Lots of different thoughts on what that could possibly mean. I would just go with it says that, so that's what I would go with. This Holocaust will destroy a third of the earth's trees, and it says there all of the grass. And when you look at that, and then you get to chapter 9, and in verse 4, you read that the grass exists again. So, how do you explain that? There's lots of times in the Bible where, how did this happen, and how many days was this, and then it looks like, and what year was this king? Remember we were in Daniel and we were talking about the years of the kings, and it looked like it was contradicting each other, and then you realize, well, how do they number the year of the king? Do they number it by the first year of his reign or the first year of whatever? I don't know exactly what the answer would be because I only have what you have here in front of you as well, but it could be that there's enough time in between until we get to the point in chapter 9 verse 4 that the grass grows back again. I don't know. But I'm just going to still choose to take it as it states here. So these trumpet judgments and the bowl judgments that come after them bring these literal plagues. They bring these things onto the earth, just like the Egyptian plagues were literal plagues. All those things that happened in Egypt really happened. Those people really died. The firstborn that wasn't covered in the Passover, the firstborn that didn't have the posts with the blood, they died. They really died. These were real things. And the Old Testament prophets understood the miracles of Egypt in a very clear way. And they even said at the time that there would be a repeating of these plagues in the future. You can find that in Isaiah chapter 10, and in Isaiah chapter 11, and in Isaiah chapter 30. You can find it in Jeremiah 16. At several points, the prophet Amos uses God's miraculous work of deliverance in Egypt as a reference point for the way he's going to deal with his people in the future. In Amos chapter 2 and verse 10, in Amos chapter 4 and verse 10, in Amos chapter 8 and verses 8 and 9, in Amos chapter 9 verses 5 through 7, that what happened in Egypt is a reference point and something for us to know in our minds is how God is going to deal with his people. Let's look at chapter 8 verses 8 and 9 in the second trumpet. And the second angel blew his trumpet, and something like a great mountain. By the way, did you notice there? Something like a great mountain. It doesn't say a great mountain, but something like a great mountain. This is John trying to figure out how to stay these things. Yeah, maybe it's something, maybe a meteor, maybe a large chunk of rock that's coming from the sky. I don't know what it is. But something like a great mountain burning with fire was thrown into the sea, and a third of the sea became blood. A third of the living creatures in the sea died, and a third of the ships were destroyed. So the second trumpet is blown. Something like a great mountain, a great piece, a chunk of rock or whatever. It must have been huge to even get that statement from John. It falls from the heavens, from the sky, into the waters of one or more of the earth's seas, and it just lands in that water, and the result is that a third of the sea, a third of the water becomes blood. You go, wasn't that like in the Egyptian plagues? Didn't that happen there too? Oh, yeah. And whether that water becomes actual blood, which I think it does, or a substance like blood, or if it just simply looks like blood, it's really not, it's actually difficult to determine from the text. But the ocean's water could become literal blood. You know what? From what I understand from chemists, there's not much of a difference between the chemical balance or whatever you have, the chemical makeup of seawater and blood. And I don't even know if this meteor comes out of the sky, this big mountain mass comes out of the sky and lands. Maybe it provides that mineral or the element of whatever it takes to make that difference, to make up that change. And those of you who are chemists, you can come talk to me later and say, you are so messed up, Todd. There's nothing like that whatsoever. I do know this, when I'm swimming in the sea, there's oftentimes when it just kind of has a smell of blood or a taste of blood to me. You can talk to me, those of you from Florida, come talk to me and say, you're messed up again. That's not the truth. And sometimes, I've been in Florida when you couldn't go swimming because some of the algae was so bad and it was like the water looked red. Yeah. I mean, things like that happen. So I don't know exactly what this means, but the mountain is probably best understood to be some kind of a literal thing that falls out of the sky, a literal stone, rock, whatever. The results seem to be very literal, that these things happen after the rock falls. A third of the creatures of the sea die. A third of the ships that were on the sea, they're destroyed somehow. The amillennialist Beale, he takes the mountain figuratively. He says it represents a kingdom. He says specifically it represents the kingdom of Babylon that gets talked about in chapters 11 through 18. I don't see that. I think that's a stretch. I'm going, okay, it's a stretch for me to say that it's a meteor, because all I'm told is that it's a mountain. It's a big thing that looks like a mountain. But to make that into a kingdom, and specifically make that into to Babylon, I don't see that. So I think John was clearly describing supernatural things. This is not something that we may have little hints of that kind of a thing happening or on a smaller scale, but this is huge, very much an intervention of God. In verses 10 and 11, we have the third trumpet. It says, the third angel blew his trumpet, and a great star fell from heaven, blazing like a torch. And it fell on a third of the rivers and on the springs of water. And the name of the star is Wormwood. A third of the waters became wormwood, and many people died from the water because it had been made bitter. So this next thing is a great star, again, maybe a meteor, a comet or something. It has a train, it says from the description here. It falls from heaven, and it falls now on the fresh water. On the fresh water sources of the earth, this big thing falls down, and it, something in it makes it bitter. Some kind of a mineral compound of this thing that comes onto the earth makes it bad. This star as well was on fire. It's burning like a torch. That word torch, lampus is the word used here. Translated torch is kind of the same thing of that shooting star, that trail of a star. And it had this poisonous aspect to it, this made bitter, a third of the rivers and the springs of water. Many people died because they didn't have fresh water to drink. They couldn't drink this water. It was made, poisonous, I guess would be the thing, or at least not to taste, not to drink. And this burning star takes a third of those rivers and springs away. The word wormwood, which we have in Deuteronomy 29:18, it comes from like a bitter herb, a bitter, not necessarily like it would kill you, but just awful. And you have situations where at Mara where they put something to make the bitter fresh again. In this case, it's the opposite. It's that the fresh water is being made bitter, and it again reminds us of the Egyptian plagues back in Exodus 7. The fourth trumpet, verse 12. The fourth angel blew his trumpet, and a third of the sun was struck, and a third of the moon, and a third of the stars, so that a third of their light might be darkened, and a third of the day might be kept from shining, and likewise a third of the night. The repeated use of a third probably means it was right there at a third, over and over again through this book. We had the idea of a fourth, or 25%, back with the seals. Now it's over and over again a third. And at this time when the trumpet sounds, it's not on the earth, it's the skies above the earth. It is everything. It is the planets. It is, everything that we see. And they are affected. And it could be a literal darkness. It could be a figurative darkness. It could be a spiritual darkness. It could be all at the same time, spiritual and a physical darkness. In Isaiah 13 and verses 9 and 10, Isaiah says, "Behold, the day of the Lord comes, cruel, with wrath and fierce anger, to make the land a desolation and to destroy its sinners from it. For the stars of the heavens and their constellations will not give their light. The sun will be dark at its rising, and the moon will not shed its light." This darkening sky, these heavenly bodies, it's going to have an effect. It's certainly meant to warn people, to say, judgment is coming. Do you see this? Because up till now, we don't have the sense of people dying other than the fact that because of the drinking water, people died. They didn't have fresh drinking water to drink. But as we get through these next trumpets, we're going to see that it affects people in a big way. And you can think about these things happening and saying, that's got to affect how people live. That all of a sudden you don't have, it's got to cool down the temperatures a bit. It's got to make farming and doing other things more, I guess, less productive, more difficult. But somehow God is going to cut back the total amount of light from the sun and the moon and the stars by 1/3. In Luke chapter 21 and verse 25, it says, "And there will be signs in sun and moon and stars, and on the earth, distress of nations and perplexity because of the roaring of the sea and the waves." And again, that would be affected. Verse 26, "People fainting with fear and with foreboding of what is coming on the world. For the powers of the heavens will be shaken. And then they will see the Son of Man coming in a cloud with power and great glory. Now when these things begin to take place, straighten up and raise your heads, because your redemption is drawing near." That is Christ talking. Be ready for this kind of thing. And perhaps this eclipse, this partial eclipse in the atmosphere, all of this stuff is happening in such a way to get the attention of the people on the earth. More catastrophic things are going to happen. We got their attention, right? They knew it was God doing this back with the seals, right? Hide us from the wrath of the Lamb. And now, and then there's this pause, and I imagine when that pause takes, in that 30-minute pause, whatever it was, that people on the earth are like, okay, come out from the caves. Maybe it's okay, maybe it's over. And then these things start happening. And it has a devastating effect on the earth, on the world. Those that have a non-literal interpretation of this, they would view this darkness only as a spiritual darkness. It's not a real darkness. It's just talking spiritually only. And then in verse 13, this will have to bring us to a close. Chapter 9, we'll get to the other two, we'll get to trumpets 5 and 6. But it says there in verse 13, "Then I looked, and I heard an eagle crying with a loud voice as if it flew directly overhead, 'Woe, woe, woe to those who dwell on the earth at the blast of the other trumpets that the three angels are about to blow.'" So John says, "Then I looked, and I see this vision. It's an eagle. In Luke chapter 17, the same word is translated vulture. It doesn't matter what it could be an angel. I don't know. It says eagle, but it's this flying, must have been a very large bird for whatever reason, because it's like between the sky. It's up there in the overhead elements. And he's saying, crying out, talking, which sounds really weird, right? How often have we heard eagles say, "Whoa, whoa, whoa"? But you have to understand that God is in control of all the animals. If this is a literal eagle or a vulture or whatever, a literal large bird, not an angel, but a large bird, it will have the ability to say, "Whoa, whoa, whoa." Just like the donkey, Balaam's donkey had the ability to talk to him, right? Just like the snake. It wasn't like in the Garden of Eden when Eve had that snake talk to her. She didn't say, "What? Snakes are talking? What is this all about?" There was no surprise there. It was like, yeah, animals communicate. And here you have a large eagle, vulture bird flying overhead, saying, "Woe, woe, woe," 3 woes. Be careful, watch out, be warned, be ready. This eagle is basically saying God's judgment is ready to come, is still to come. Another possibility is that this eagle could be an angel. Some have said that, some think that. I don't particularly think that, but some view it as a symbol of nature. It's just a symbolic of nature itself, and nature is kind of saying, "Hey, you better be ready. Watch out. This is a warning to the people here." But this idea of being there in mid-heaven, kind of at the position of the sun and the moon, and it was at a place where everybody could see this creature. Everybody knew of the warning, of the whoa, whoa, whoa. And for this trumpet that's given to warn of the trumpets that are still to come, the next 3 angels. And the next 3 are much worse. They get worse as they go, because so many people will die. So many people are going to be the targets of the next trumpet judgment. But here we have a triple woe. We sometimes have woe, woe, woe Bethesda, or woe, Christ would say, "Woe to, let them be warned. Shake the dust off your feet," at least, whatever it is, these people need to realize judgment will be upon you. Bethesda, you're going to be judged for what you're doing, the way you've treated the people of God. Woe unto you. And here is the triple woe that these earth dwellers, which is commonplace terminology throughout the book of Revelation for those who are rejecting God, rebelling against God, those who are deserving of God's judgment. All right, we're going to have to stop. Number 1, because my voice is going out, and I don't know if I can go any further. But number 2, we'll pick it back up with chapter 9 and the next verses. We'll get into the next trumpets, and then we'll have some time there in chapters 10 and most of 11 to deal with some other things. And then that last trumpet will bring in 7 bowl judgments, and we can do this. We can get through it all. We're going to sing a song here before we really close. It's called "God Sees the Heart." It's actually become kind of a favorite in the church. God knows what's really true in our hearts. He doesn't treat us by our stature or the rank that we command or who we think we are. He judges us in the heart. What have you done with your heart? What have you done concerning God? He sees much more than you think he sees. He knows exactly who you are. He knows why you are floating in your Christian life. And it's a great song. So number 77 in your songbooks. Our God measures man by a standard divine. for he sees underneath every outward design. Let's sing that song, and then we'll close in prayer, and we're dismissed. How did I do on time? Yeah, good. Number 77, let's stand up as we sing, and let's let the piano player break free.